Can't decide and torn between a romantic, comedy, action, or an indie film to watch for the weekend? Well. Golden State Media Concepts Movie Podcast is your ultimate guide to the latest movies. Join us as we dissect the latest on the blockbusters. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Movie Podcast.
Hello and welcome to the GSMC Movie Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am Keith, and this is my lovely co-host, Cynthia.
Hello.
So how's it going? How was your week?
It was great. Let me see. I'm trying to think. I feel like when I have to think back about what happened a week ago, so many events took place that I can't remember. Like even stuff that happened 2 days ago, I feel like it's been a week ago. Does that make sense?
Yes, yeah. Which is funny because earlier today we were both talking about how it feels like November has just flown by.
It really has. It's crazy. Now it's less than a month away to Christmas and then New Year's, which it's my favorite time of the year, so I'm definitely not complaining, but I do want time to slow down. And it's cuddle season right now. It's cuffing season. So, and in movie season, because when it comes to staying indoors and staying warm, you got to play movies, hence the movie podcast. Yeah.
So we're here to give you all of your movie suggestions that you should watch for the winter. Though that's not what this episode was
or
about
not
at all.
Watch. Yeah, episode,
or not watch.
We're pretty critical in today's episode. So
yeah. So I think that what we're going to talk about first, it's on everybody's minds. It's been happening once every other year for the last 4, maybe 5, even 6 years now. Mm-hmm. Yet another mediocre Disney Star Wars film is coming out on December 20th.
I'm sorry to all the Star Wars fans. He just said mediocre. They're going to be in the comments with some hate comments like, how do you guys not like Star Wars?
Oh my gosh. So you have in your notes that you've never seen a Star Wars movie all the way through.
Absolutely not. I can't tell you because there's so many. That's the thing. When there's too much, it overwhelms me. Mm-hmm. And
there's what?
There's special editions, there's TV shows.
Yeah, there's eight total Star Wars movies that's not even including the TV shows and the extended universe. So I can understand why it would be a little intimidating have you watched part of any of the movies?
I watched part, but I don't remember exactly which one it was. Mm-hmm. The movies are really long. They're over 2 hours, some of them. So I remember just falling asleep to it.
Does that mean that you haven't watched Lord of the Rings either?
I have not watched Lord of the Rings. Oh my
goodness.
I think, is this Star Wars, would you classify this genre as sci-fi? Would you, right? Sci-fi? Because I'm not really into, that's kind of when I think of Star Wars, sci-fi, and that's not really what I gravitate towards.
Yeah, so sci-fi is derivative of a genre that was, I can't remember the author's name, H.G. Wells, that's his name. So H.G. Wells is one of the OG science fiction guys, and it's a genre of fiction that is based off of specific ideas in science. So that's why it's called sci-fi. Mm-hmm. So the original sci-fi genre was obviously books because books came before movies. But one of the classics is The Invisible Man or War of the Worlds. And those are about specific ideas in science being explored through the lens of fiction. So Star Wars is kind of the cinematic godfather, if you will, mm-hmm. of the sci-fi genre. But that's just because it kind of brought science fiction into popularity. Though if you watch any of the movies from the 70s through probably the late 80s that were trying to do what Star Wars did, they are awful. There's this movie called Krull, which I won't even make you watch. It's only 2 hours long, but it feels like a 5-hour-long movie. The cinematography is abysmal. The dialogue makes no sense. The story is so boring. I cannot even begin to tell you how awful most of the movies that were trying to do what Star Wars did are. They're just bad.
Man. Yeah. And I think also why I never got into it is because the couple of times when I did try to watch Star Wars, I didn't watch it in order. So I might have watched it. And again, I don't even remember like the title or which movie exactly I watched, but I just remember like falling asleep like halfway through, like just snoozed out. So to be honest, I'm not that excited. I feel like with Star Wars, again, it's like you're on the either side of the spectrum. You're either like you're super excited for it, like you're all about me, the fourth force, whatever, be with you, that whole joke, or you're just like me, like totally
nothing about the force is a joke, Cynthia.
Or just totally uninterested, and I'm totally uninterested. And it is actually the 9th Star Wars that's coming out on December 20th, the Rise of Luke Skywalker.
No, just
Rise
Skywalker.
of the
Skywalker or Rise of Skywalker, something like that. Yeah, the main Star Wars storyline has revolved pretty heavily around the Skywalker family. So like episodes 1 through 3 are all about, well, they're kind of all about Anakin Skywalker. You can make an argument that they're more about like Obi-Wan Kenobi. These are all names that mean nothing to you, I assume.
No.
Yeah.
I mean, I did look up the characters. Like, I had to come in with some type of knowledge. So I'm like, I know Yoda.
Everybody knows
green,
Yoda. Yeah,
Yoda,
the baby Yoda memes going
Princess
around from the
Leia.
Mandalorian right now.
I know Princess Leia because I see a lot of I saw a lot of Halloween costumes with girls and like the twisted hair buns to the side. And every time I see, actually they name like a hairstyle after Princess Leia. Like they call those the Leia buns. So that's the only reason why I know is because of the beauty community. So.
I call them like, they kind of look like a Cinnabon on the side of your head.
Right,
Yeah,
exactly.
so I call them Cinnabons.
I think that's what they're called, a bun.
Yeah.
Right?
They're all twirly and stuff, but yeah, which is funny because like that, I don't know if I would call that her iconic look from the movies because that's not how she looks in like all of the most memorable scenes with Leia in the original trilogy. That's not what her hair looks like. Like she's got it in a ponytail, she's got it in like an updo, but
so
she
when
does not,
when does she have the buns?
the side buns were like episode 4, which is technically the first movie, which is yet another reason why people who aren't into Star Wars probably won't get into Star Wars. Because technically, episode 1 was made in 2001, but it's the 4th movie that came out in the Star Wars series.
See, that's why I'm confused.
Yeah,
Because
so episode 4 is A New Hope. That's the one that came out in 1977.
that was the first one that came out.
So that one is episode 4. Episode 5 is The Empire Strikes Back, and episode 6 is Return of the Jedi. Then in the 2000s, we went backwards to episodes 1, 2, and 3.
See, I don't get is this in chronological order? Because
No.
it's hard for me to follow the story. Like, it's just kind of a lot of things are happening. There's a lot of characters, and like how you said, it's like, how is it? Yeah, I'm confused by what you just said now.
It's not generally accessible. No, I totally understand. The interesting thing about Star Wars, about science fiction as a genre, and what Star Wars did for that genre is that, like, it used to be that science fiction, and like I guess Star Trek did this before Star Wars did, but it took the idea of science fiction of this like these advanced, intricate systems of people and places and things and made them accessible to like a general audience. So like Star Trek is a really good example of this because they basically took like a lot of advanced technology ideas and like alien ideas and kind of tried to percolate them down into something that was more easily digested by audiences. And Star Wars does the same thing, but Star Wars does it where Star Trek does it by appealing to like cultural or morality or other influences in people's lives. Star Wars does it by taking the classic hero's journey trope story and then translating that into the, like, I don't know, galaxy, the world of science fiction, right? So like you have all of your standard things from like an action movie in all of the Star Wars films. You have the like the good guy versus the bad guy, this easy dichotomy for everybody to follow, but then like, oh wait, the bad guy's a little bit relatable. And then it's like, oh, but we still want the good guy to win. But the bad guy is so bad. He blows up a planet in episode 4. Like, it's a big deal, which they totally ripped off in episode, what is that? 7? Yeah,
I
episode
couldn't
7.
tell you because again, I've never watched any of the films. So which are they called episodes? Like the trilogy? Is it episodes,
guess.
Whatever?
Yes.
So which ones have you seen?
I've seen all of them,
So
unfortunately.
you've seen all. So I'm a bit confused. So if you don't like Star Wars, why is it that you've seen all of the movies?
I used to love Star Wars. I think that, and this is where a lot of people will disagree with me. I think that episodes 7 and 8 were like 2 of the worst films to ever come out. They took something. So in order to understand Star Wars, not only do you have to understand the plot and the intricacies of Star Wars, but you kind of have to, if you're going to appreciate it, you have to. I think you have to understand where it came from. And so, have you ever heard of a guy named George Lucas?
The name rings a bell.
Yeah, so George Lucas is the guy who wrote Star Wars. I don't know if he actually wrote all of it, but it's his intellectual property that he sold to Disney 5 or 6 years ago to the tune of I want to say somewhere around $1 billion. It was a ridiculous amount of money.
So he sold it to Disney.
He sold it to Disney, and Disney has since taken it and it was a racing horse that had retired, and George Lucas was like, I'm going to take this horse out to pasture and give it a nice burial. Oh, wait, instead I'll sell this to Disney. And then Disney was like, yeah, we're going to take this horse back onto the track and make it run until it dies on the racetrack because we've milked it for everything that it could possibly get for us. So they've as soon as they purchased it, they planned out another trilogy because the Star Wars movies are traditionally released in trilogy form so that it follows the overall timeline. And then
but the timeline is all mixed up, so that's why I can't really follow.
Only by release date of movie, right?
Yeah.
So if you look at the content of the movies, episodes 1, 2, and 3 came out in the early 2000s. I think it was 2001. I want to say 2003, and then 2007. I want to say was when those all came out, right? Because I think I was still in high school when episode 3 came out. So those 3 came out, and those are what's called the prequels, right? Because everything that happens in those movies happens prior to what happens in the movies that came out in the 70s and 80s.
Wow. I'm learning a lot here. I think we need to take a quick break because I need to digest everything that was just told to me. And when we come back, I'm going to break it down Star Wars for Dummies when we get back.
All right.
Want to know the latest and hottest music hitting the airwaves? Don't be left out. Listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Music Podcast. Keith keeps you on the loop with everything you need to know from pop, rock, hip-hop, and the top 40. And we'll throw in news of your favorite artists, concert and tour dates, and so much more. Listen no further because this is the gold standard in music podcast.
Welcome back to the GSMC movie podcast. We left off talking about Star Wars, and we're still talking about Star Wars.
Because there's just so many movies, and there's so much...
There's a lot of content to talk about here.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
I'm going to break it down for y'all who have never watched Star Wars, like me, Star Wars for Dummies. And I literally typed this into Google, and there were so many... articles and links about if you've never seen Star Wars, click here. You'd be surprised. There's a lot of people who have not seen, these movies. So I didn't feel too bad about not being into them. So here we go, you guys. I'm going to break it down really quick for you guys, the ones who are not into Star Wars. So this is only 5 things you really need to know. Keith, you can correct me if I'm wrong because I've never seen these movies. So this little Star Wars for Dummies 5 points I got here could totally be wrong. So just jump in if they're wrong.
I'll dissect them one by one after you're done saying all 5.
So number 1, the Empire is bad. The Jedi Knights are good. Number 2, Darth Vader is Luke Skywalker's father.
Spoiler alert.
Number 3, Princess Leia is Luke's sister and therefore Darth Vader's daughter too. Number 4, there are lots of animals or aliens, villains on the planets they visit, but none of them are very scary looking. And number 5, the Empire is defeated, but the struggle continues. Now, I want Keith to really break it down for us because, again, that's just what I typed in, and those are the main points that told me that's really the basics, what you need to know. Obviously, there's way more complicated things that go along with it, but I want Keith to break it down for us a little more because I want to actually get a little in tune with this whole Star Wars craze? Because I feel like, am I missing out?
To a degree, perhaps. It's kind of like, goodness, I don't want to say it's like Harry Potter, because they're both like kind of the same thing, where it's this easily consumable version of a more complex genre. So like Harry Potter took high fantasy and kind of brought it down a couple notches into the teen fantasy genre, right? And made that super accessible to everybody, but like adults liked it too. Star Wars does kind of the same thing, where it takes this like very haughty, high level science fiction concept and dissects it into something that's much more easily digestible by a general audience. But like, to get to your point on 5 things that people need to know about Star Wars. So the Empire is bad and Jedi Knights are good. That's not necessarily true. The Empire is bad and Jedi Knights are, in air quotes, good.
So let me jump in real quick. Jedi Knights is it like an army? That's what I was trying to understand. Like, what is a Jedi?
Oh my goodness. Okay, so we really have to start from basics here.
I know. I'm telling you, Star Wars for dummies here. Like,
Jedi Knights are part of like a monk-like sect of individuals who practice certain principles in order to access the life force or magic force that exists in this universe that is known as the Force. So if you are a Jedi, you exist on the quote-unquote good side of individuals who have access to the ability to use the Force, which is like this omnipresent, pervasive thing that allows them to have like superpowers. So they can be like super good at predicting things. They can do mind tricks on people. They can move objects with telekinesis, and they can fight with lightsabers, because most people who swung a lightsaber around would end up chopping their arms off. Jedi do not do that because they have access to the Force. So
interesting.
But they are good in the sense that like they represent the archetype of good, but they're not good in the sense that they're like absolutely good. And that is something that George Lucas was kind of playing on when he owned Star Wars. But once Disney took it over, they basically said, well, what if we just made this really simple again? And then after that, they said, well, what if we distribute this also primarily to Chinese audiences? And therefore, it just ultimately ended up becoming like the Fast and Furious, but in the Star Wars universe, which is part of the reason why I like vehemently hate the most recent Star Wars movies. Disney did such a bad job with these movies that it ruined my fandom of Star Wars. In high school, I was the leader of the Star Wars fan club.
Stop. You had a Star Wars fan club in high school?
Yeah, I led it.
Wow.
At my high school for 2 years.
So when did Disney, do you know if
I would have to look
year?
it up.
Yeah.
It was in the 2010s, obviously. It was within the last few years. I want to say it was 5 to 6 years ago. That would make sense to me. It may have been 4 or 5 years ago. All I know is that they've released a part of this trilogy every other year since they purchased it. And since we're in the third one, that would mean that we're minimum 5 years out from when they purchased it, if I'm doing my math correctly. So,
I heard this is the final to the saga, this 9th film that's coming out. Is that correct?
So it's the final to this. Like, as I mentioned before, most of the sagas come out in triplicate form, right? So episodes 1 through 3 is the prequel saga. Episodes 4 through 6 is the original saga. And then episodes 7 through 9, they're whatever saga they're going to call this one. The garbage saga is what I would call it.
The garbage saga.
These movies are so bad, in my opinion, that they make the prequels look like good movies.
So why is it so bad, Tina? Like, what is it that... what is it about Disney purchasing, like when they made that purchase, that just changed the whole story for you?
Well, so George Lucas had originally said that he wasn't going to make any more Star Wars movies. And people have been asking him for years, ever since episode 3 came out in the late 2000s. Like, George, are you going to make, Mr. Lucas, are you going to make any more Star Wars movies? He said, no, maybe in 20 years, right?
Yeah.
Because the thing about George Lucas that Disney doesn't have is that this is George Lucas's baby. Like, everything that was bad about the prequels came from George Lucas. The dialogue was garbage. And, like, it was just so campy. And that was, like, an organic thing that happened during the makings of those films because George Lucas treated this as his baby. Whereas, like, Disney treats this like a cash cow. So, like, if you watch the last movie, episode 8, it is so full of things that were specifically designed for like Chinese audiences is a big one, that it just kind of like, it takes you out of being in the film. And then on top of that, they basically just said like, well, what if we did what the original Star Wars series did, but we did it with actors who are more popular, or we did it with special effects that are better. But it's like the plot is convoluted, it's pointless, it meanders around, it does nothing useful. And then they just like they crammed, like episode 7 is basically just how many references to the original trilogy can we cram into a 2-hour-long movie, including scenes and specific dialogue from those trilogies. And like so like all of the tropes that people are familiar with from the original Star Wars trilogies were included in episode 7. Because Disney was just trying to convince people that they were going to do a good job with the series. And then episode 8 came out, and it was just like, it is the worst Star Wars movie that I have ever seen.
The 8th.
Like, there's this, so Star Wars is this like huge universe, right? And there is this Christmas special that George Lucas put out in the 80s that is rumored to be like one of the worst things that ever happened to Star Wars. I would argue, I've never seen the Christmas special. I would argue that episode 8 is worse than that. Like, it is just such a huge piece of trash,
man,
as far as the film is concerned.
Harsh. That is extremely harsh. So I'm definitely taking that you will not be catching the 9th film.
No. And
the one that's coming out on December 20th.
Yeah, honestly, I'll probably read the synopsis so that I can talk about it with other people. But like, ultimately, a lot of the things that I loved about Star Wars are gone. So
that's I kind of know that feeling. That sucks. I mean, it's a love-hate, I feel, that what you have with Star Wars, because it's something that you used to really, I mean, yeah, how you said when Disney purchased it, just kind of changed, and the plot is just not the same. And do you feel that Disney's just kind of elongating the story? Like, do you think the story, like the saga, should have already ended?
No, and I don't think, it's not that the content that they're putting out is bad. Well, the content is bad, but it's not that wanting to put out more Star Wars content is bad. It's that they're putting out content that appeals to a larger audience. And when you try to appeal to a larger audience with something that has as much history and as much nostalgia as Star Wars does, no matter what you do, you're going to upset people. So I think that they're kind of in between a rock and a hard place in regards to what to do with this whole film thing. So why not just water it down as much as possible so that everybody will watch them? Like, Disney has put out a Star Wars film every year since they purchased Star Wars. And now they're putting out TV shows as well, like The Mandalorian.
I know. That's how I found out about Baby Yoda. I thought, because I was on Twitter, and there was a whole bunch of funny memes with Baby Yoda. And that's what confuses me, because when I searched, in what episode does Baby Yoda appear, it said, oh, it's actually in this.
Yeah,
what
it's
was
in a TV
it?
show. And it's
TV
not
show.
Actually Baby Yoda is the thing. It's just a baby version of the alien
It's so
species
cute.
that Yoda is. Oh, it's adorable. I won't disagree. Yeah, no, it's cute. I've heard good things about The Mandalorian. Let me know in the comments if you guys like it. I'm considering watching it.
So considering watching that one, but definitely not.
No, I'll be watching
Rise
the
of
one.
Skywalker.
I'll watch the one in the theaters eventually. Like, it's hard. It's hard as someone who was such a fanboy in my younger days to kind of watch something that you love be like milked for cash.
Yeah.
On that note, we're gonna end our conversation about Star Wars there. I definitely would recommend seeing it if you like Star Wars. Don't let my Debbie Downer attitude discourage you or make you feel bad if you do like Star Wars. I think if you have something positive to say about it, I am definitely interested in hearing it. I would love to have my mind changed and for me to love Star Wars again. But we're going to take a quick break. And when we get back, we're going to talk about a completely different genre of movies that has nothing to do with this.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Hello and welcome back to GSMC Movie Podcast. Right before the break, Keith was letting us know why he is not a fan of Star Wars anymore. And we're moving on again to a totally different genre of movies. So bank heist, pretty much. And the one that we're going to be talking about, it's called Takers. It was a movie that was released in 2010. And if you didn't catch the episode, last week's episode, we talked about trash genres. Mm-hmm. And to be honest, I would consider this movie as a trash genre. And I'm so sad to say that because the actors in this film are like A-list actors. Like, who do we have? We have Paul Walker.
Idris Elba,
right. Okay.
But then we have...
We have T.I., who Tip Harris that's his rap name, T.I. Chris Brown.
Oh, he is T.I. is a rapper.
Yes.
Okay, I didn't know that. I was pretty sure. Like anytime I see just initials and then somebody with and they're in quotations as their middle name. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So T.I. and Chris Brown, they're both music.
Brown.
Chris
yes,
Brown,
the one you're thinking of.
Yes.
And
Michael Ealy.
And
who did I write?
Hayden Christensen is in this movie.
So honestly, it's the cast is really what intrigued me because and how I even found out about this movie, I was watching it with my brother and we were just scrolling through movies on Netflix and this one came up and we just saw the cover photo and we just saw the actors and I was like, okay, well this has to be good because why would A-list actors be in a bad movie? That was my thought, right? So,
did you know that the Fast and Furious, the most recent of those movies, they're considered trash films? And like Skyscraper with Dwayne The Rock Johnson,
what?
Those get classified as trash films because they're just so bad. They're so badly written.
Oh my goodness! Well,
so it's not a surprise that this would. So it's not a surprise when you see A-list
are they?
actors.
I wonder if they're the same direct. Are they the same director?
I mean, we could Google it, but I don't think there's any reason to. I think ultimately this director didn't get another gig. I'd be interested to know what the box office numbers for this movie were because after watching the trailer, it was just so ludicrous. Like Ludacris, another rapper.
I know Ludacris, right? Another rapper.
So the trailer's really interesting. Because it's got it shows everybody and they're all like, yeah, we do these super awesome advanced bank heists. Mm-hmm. But then there comes this one guy who's back from jail and he's like, hey guys, don't you trust me? And they're like, nah, I'm suspicious. So it's just really interesting. But the whole time they've got this epic rap music going over the top of it. And every time something hits in the song, they do something ridiculous.
Right.
In the trailer.
Like something blows up
or someone busts through a window.
That must have been T.I. who directed that part because if you guys don't know who T.I. and Chris, you know Chris Brown, he's a performer, musician, and T.I. is he's a rapper. Mm-hmm. And they, especially them two, they gained a lot of criticism from audience members who watched the movie because they were just saying that because of them, they felt like it brought down the movie in a sense and that they should stay in their lane and just stick to music.
Right.
I don't think they're terrible actors, but I feel like they weren't the right ones to be picked for these characters in this film.
Yeah, well, bad writing will make anybody a bad actor. And just the premise of this movie is it's these 5 guys who do super advanced bank heists and somebody comes back from being in jail and now they're trying to pull the biggest heist of all time. It's your basic we're going to get busted trope.
Right. Everything was just expected. There was no when I think of drama, action, thriller movies, I want twists and turns. I want to be on the edge of my seat and this movie just didn't meet my expectations, and I'm sad because I had extremely high hopes when I was watching the film because of the cast members. Like, I was like, oh, this has to be good. And then
Idris Elba's usually really good.
I know, and him and Paul Walker were the best ones in the movie.
But I will say, Idris Elba walking away from the helicopter exploding in the trailer is
that
hilarious.
was funny. That was funny. I was going to mention
watch
that.
Watch the trailer just for that, because he's got this, like, his arms are like way too high, and I just want to know who's the person who had that take and was like, that's the one.
Right. Overall, the movie was just too generic, and there was no suspense. And the worst part about the movie, like, I was actually intrigued. There were, again, like, them walking away from, like, the helicopter blowing up. I was kind of like, okay, that's kind of corny,
cornballs,
right?
yeah.
Kind of corny, like. But I was kind of like intrigued throughout the whole movie. But the ending of the movie is what
Spoiler
really,
alert.
yeah. This is a spoiler, so if you can click out of the show now if you don't want to hear it.
Just skip like 5 seconds ahead.
Right. I just hated the ending because pretty much almost all the main characters die in the movie, but not even that. I just feel like how you said, it goes back to the bad writing. Like, I felt no emotional connection to their deaths. Yeah. Because there was no buildup. It was just kind of like they died. And I remember my brother and I were so confused. We're like, wait, like,
what?
Is this just how it ends? And like, so
it's like the same thing as last week's movie. We're like, what does Alzheimer's have to do with sharks?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I was just so disappointed. That was the biggest thing. I was like, oh my God.
I can imagine that's
what
a
a
huge
waste of
letdown.
of an hour and a half of my life right there.
I'm going to go watch it knowing that it's terrible and let you know my thoughts because I love watching bad movies. But yeah, I mean, on the note of like heist movies and things like that, like, why don't we make some positive suggestions to people instead of ripping on things for an entire half hour? So
we are not negative people, you guys. We are not negative, critical people.
So, like, if you were going to recommend a bank heist movie for somebody, what's one that you might recommend, or something that's along those lines?
So I have two, but one's a docu-series on Netflix, and the other one's an actual movie. So I'll go with the docu-series because that one I really, really liked. I was so tuned in. So it's called Evil Genius, the true story of America's most diabolical bank heist. And I think I enjoyed this the most because it's facts. This actually happened. So this happened in 2006, and it's like the biggest bank heist, or one of the biggest that's ever happened in the U.S. And her name is Marjorie. She's like the mastermind, and I think she's either still locked up or she died in jail. So she's a mastermind. They call this pizza guy delivers pizza, and they tie a collar bomb around his neck and send him to the bank, and just everything that took place behind the scenes to get to that point is what makes the film so worth watching. Like, I highly, highly recommend if you're into like bank heist movies or films, documentaries, definitely this one's a good pick. And this one has twists and turns if you're like me and that's kind of what you're hoping for out of like thriller movies. Definitely watch this. It's bizarre. It's definitely bizarre.
It sounds interesting just from the premise that you've told me.
Yeah, and it's 4 episodes. It's like a 4-episode docuseries on Netflix.
I guess each episode's like, what, like an hour?
Yeah, a little over an hour, like an hour 15. And it's really good. If you want to, it's true. That's what I really liked. I'm like, wow, this actually happened. And it's an FBI case that's still not 100% resolved. Like, they have one person locked up, and they believe it was a 4-person ordeal.
Wow.
So, no, I definitely recommend, Keith.
Color me interested.
Yeah, so I definitely recommend that one. What about you, Keith? What would be one you suggest?
Yeah, well, conveniently, you also wrote about this in the show notes. So there's a movie called The Town, directed by Ben Affleck, which is actually a really good bank heist movie. If you have seen The Town and you're looking for something similar, I would highly recommend, I think it's called A Place Beyond the Pines. It has is it Gosling? Is Ryan Gosling the one that was in Drive? Do you know that movie, Drive?
I can't think right now.
I think it's Ryan Gosling. He's like the shorter gentleman who's very handsome. He wears like bomber jackets and usually has a mustache.
Right, yeah.
I can see him in my head. He was great in that movie. But the movie The Town by Ben Affleck was just really awesome. Like, have you seen that movie?
I have. I think it over glorifies bank robberies just a tiny bit.
I think that was kind of part of the point, though.
Right. And
yeah.
I liked the actors in the movie, like Blake Lively. I grew up watching Gossip Girl. So I've always been a fan of Blake Lively, but I think the director, which was Ben Affleck, does a great job, much better job in character development and storyline compared to the writers on Takers. So just the storyline and the plot alone is much, much better in The Town, and that's why I enjoyed it a lot more.
Yeah, and you kind of get attached to some of the characters in The Town. Yeah. Because it's not just a movie about bank heists, it's about the people who commit them and like the culture that surrounds that like glorification of criminality and things like that. Right. So I thought it was a really interesting commentary as well as a great bank heist movie.
And I think that's one of the key components when writing a movie. You have to make sure that your audience has some type of emotional connection with the characters. Like,
people are invested in what's going on.
And that's something that Takers failed, to be honest. Like I said, at the very end, that's really what just threw me off. I was like, what? Big question mark, really, for me.
Yeah.
So our two recommendations for bank heist movies / films is the docuseries Evil Genius, the true story of America's most diabolical bank heist, and The Town, which we both agree on.
Yeah. And just because it is cuddle season, right? And it is also almost Christmas.
It is.
I want to say technically, what is it? Die Hard is technically a Christmas movie.
Is it?
Yes, it happens during Christmas.
It happens during Christmas.
It is also a movie about a heist, and it actually kind of provides like a nice, refreshing viewpoint on a heist. So I think that it's a really interesting film. Definitely worth a watch if you've never seen it.
I might need to watch it.
Yeah, you haven't seen it?
I feel
it's like a classic Bruce Willis movie.
I might have watched it a while back and not remember. I don't have the greatest memory, you guys. So.
No, yeah, it's definitely worth watching. If you're into the more like art house stuff, have you ever heard of the name Quentin Tarantino?
Yes.
So he did a movie called Reservoir Dogs, as well as another one. I think it was called like Bobby Brown or something like that. Those are two really good bank heist movies. Tarantino's he's really good at those kind of films because he's good at like changing the viewpoint or the narrative perspective to like all these different viewpoints that circle around to ultimately you as the audience have to connect them in order to build the story out. So that's really interesting. If you're looking for another movie that's kind of like so bad that it's good, I highly recommend the Italian Job remake. It's hilarious. It's definitely got some scenes that are a little ridiculous. And like they blew, just like an interesting little tidbit, they blew like half of their production budget on being able to drive Mini Coopers through the subway in Britain or some other place. Yeah, because apparently like you're not allowed, like no one has ever been allowed to drive cars in those tunnels except for the people who made this movie. So they blew like half of their production budget on getting the ability to film this like one scene that ultimately is like, it's not even that good
in the tunnel.
Yeah, and the movie's not that good overall, but it's definitely worth watching if you're looking for something that's like bad but good. So yeah, that's about that.
So yeah, that's going to end today's show. We covered a lot. We covered our dislike mainly Keith's dislike for Star Wars, because I've never watched a single movie all the way through, so I can't
remain ambiguous.
Right.
Absent from the vote.
We talked bank heists. Takers is another one that we'll classify as a trash genre film. But we do have some recommendations. Again, those are The Town and Evil Genius, the true story of America's most diabolical bank heist on Netflix. So check those two films out. Let us know in the comments if you guys do watch those. And catch us next week for another GSMC movie podcast. But don't forget to leave us some nice comments.
Like and subscribe.
5 stars, all that good stuff. And thank you guys so much for tuning in, and we wish you a happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving. Have a great week, everybody.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Movie Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.